Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, helping higher education marketing leaders share knowledge about learning, strategies, and tactics that are relevant today. See what you can learn today by listening to one of our episodes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast hosted by Concept 3D. So if you like our content, please subscribe to us or follow us on Spotify, Apple, and Google. My name is Shiro Hattori, and I am your host today. And today I'm really excited to share some very new news that we've finally reached an amazing milestone, which is episode 100. I can't believe that went by actually that fast. And I'm so grateful for everyone who has joined on as a guest. It's been a fantastic ride. I tell all my guests this publicly, but this is the favorite part of my job as a marketer for Concept 3D. I get to talk to people who are passionate about higher ed and their jobs, and it gets me fired up to do my job as a marketer within the Concept 3D company. And so I'm just so grateful for everyone who has joined so far, and I'm so happy to reach this 100th episode milestone. And for that, I'm super excited to have Jamie Hunt as our 100th episode guest. I've seen Jamie's posts on LinkedIn just explode. I think she's an amazing writer, especially short form writing, which is kind of the play on LinkedIn. But I've just seen her so many times on LinkedIn through mutual connections, and I just thought it'd be so amazing to have her on as my 100th episode guest. Jamie is the host, if you did not know, the host of the Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. She's now newly the president of the Solve Higher Ed Marketing Company. She also has over 20, or actually exactly 20 years of experience serving in leadership and CMO roles at multiple institutions, most recently at Old Dominion University. And so with that, Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here for your 100th episode. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I do ask all my guests this. So, Jamie, please tell me what you love about higher ed.
I love how higher ed transforms lives. And when I think about what I have been so lucky to have in my life in terms of like a fulfilling career and, a great life, it's all because of my degrees and the education that I got. And I love seeing all these young people and even non-traditional students sort of on the precipice of what is next in their life. And that's my favorite thing about higher ed, is just being around all this energy and enthusiasm for what the future has in store for our graduates.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, I hear this answer a lot. And I think everyone that I've had on the podcast just, has that same energy, because I think they feed off of the students and the community. So it's fantastic. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about, you said 20 years of experience serving in higher ed. Can you tell us a little bit more about your career, and also specifically, because, I'm a podcast host, can you tell us more about why you started the Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO podcast as well?
Yeah. So after working in journalism for 5 years, I decided I needed to make slightly more money. And I say slightly more because we all know higher ed doesn't pay that well either. But I was looking for an industry where I could look in the mirror and be happy with what I was quote unquote selling. And so I started my job search looking at nonprofits and higher education. And I got my first job as a PR coordinator in higher education in 2004. And I'm so happy that I have found that field as early as I did in my career, and that I've been able to make a 20-year career in higher education. So I started out in PR, ended up pivoting and to include marketing in my portfolio, and then pivoting again to include web and digital strategy in my portfolio, and then pivoted again and had government relations and public radio and enrollment marketing. And then 9 years ago, landed my first CMO and CCO role at Winston-Salem State. And so now I have been the Chief Marketing Communications Officer at 3 institutions, Winston-Salem State, which is an HBCU in North Carolina, Miami University, which is a selective public university, quite large, in Ohio, and then Old Dominion University, which is an R1 public with now a medical school. So it's been a broad swath of types of institutions, but it's been really, really fun. When I started my podcast, it was about 2.5 years ago. Zach Buzicruz, who ran Enrollify at the time, said that he was looking for hosts for podcasts, and my name kept coming up. And I think it kept coming up because was sort of the queen of spicy takes on Twitter. So I've migrated from Twitter over to LinkedIn, where I'm also a spicy take haver, as you alluded to. But I saw it as an opportunity to share some of the knowledges and experiences that I've had over my career, and to bring in guests that I can also learn from. It's like a secret, like, oh, I'm having you come in to talk about this, but I always take something away, even if it's a topic that I'm super well versed in. But I really wanted to give the higher ed community an asynchronous way to learn about some of the really important topics that we face as higher ed marketers. And that was sort of the genesis of it. We decided to call it Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO because of that sort of spicy take history I had, where I'm kind of making a confession in each episode and then bringing a guest to talk about a topic. And it's been fantastic. I'm at, as of this point, I'll be over 30,000 downloads of the podcast, which I'm really proud of and grateful for the listenership for.
Wow, that's amazing. You said 30,000?
30,000, yep. I
Wow.
just passed that milestone, and I'm very, very excited and proud of that.
Congratulations. Yeah, it's super interesting. I think your podcast started maybe half a year before this one. So that's great. It's the explosion of now. I feel like there's so many out there now, but yeah, that's amazing. And speaking of the challenges that CMOs face and the confessions that they make, are there some common themes that are currently happening with CMOs and the challenges that they face?
Yeah, I would say that the number one challenge facing CMOs is the CCO part of the job, so the Chief Communications Officer part of the job. So many campuses, the majority of campuses, have those as one role. And I totally get why. And I've been in that one role at every institution that I've been a CMO at. But it's super easy for crisis to pull us away from marketing. And it's like the urgent pulls us away from the important. And sometimes the urgent is important, but sometimes the urgent is like somebody spotted a rat in a residence hall room, and your whole week can be upended over a rat in a residence hall, right? And that is taking your eye off of enrollment marketing and really relying on your team to continue to drive that forward, where you're writing statements about a rat, and then there's the bigger crises that take up so much more time, reputational or life safety crises. And it can be super challenging to kind of balance the urgent with the important. And it makes it such a difficult job to keep those two sort of halves working together. I also think that the challenges of the enrollment cliff, which I'm sort of tired of hearing about. We were actually talking about the enrollment cliff when I started in higher ed. And it seemed so far away. And I didn't think there was any chance I would still be in higher ed when it got here. But the enrollment cliff and the pressures of enrollment, and whether or not you have a good relationship with your chief enrollment officer, can make or break the job. I've been really lucky to have great relationships through my career with the chief enrollment officer, but I've also talked to so many CMOs that don't have good relationships, and that just makes the job that much harder and that much more challenging. So those are some of the things that I see as being like those really big barriers to success.
And so I know there's many different sizes of schools, and so it may change depending on that. But you're saying that like the CCO role is almost better if it's separated or segmented out, just because it's such a big responsibility in its own. Is that kind of your suggestion or a take that you're saying?
For some campuses, I think it makes sense, particularly for larger schools and schools that have, I think, flagship universities where the scrutiny is just so intense, where you have the whole public in the state are like, this is my university, even though I didn't go there, I don't have kids that go there, but it's my university. I think those campuses really need someone, whether it's like an AVP that reports to the VP or something, but someone who can really be dedicated to the crisis and not have it pull them away from brand work or enrollment marketing work or the other important marketing type things that need to be done. It won't work for every campus, but I think some campuses need to be considering it. If you have a very crisis prone campus, it's something to think about.
Got it. And I know you brought up the urgent and important, these words. I'm assuming you're a fan of like the quadrants and the how you categorize how to work on things as a marketing team. And I believe the sweet spot is not urgent but important, right? Like working in
Yeah.
that box is like what drives things forward versus reactionary. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, being able to be proactive is
Yep.
super, super critical. And if you're working on urgent but important, you're working on important stuff, but you're usually doing it in a reactive way. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely that quadrant of it's not urgent, you're able to plan, you're able to use strategy and be proactive versus, working in a space where you're just like reacting to something, I think is always better. So I love those quadrants. If it's not urgent and not important, don't do it.
Yes, definitely. I need to bring those back a little bit more into my life too, just outside of work as well. Um, you mentioned more about, you're sick of hearing the enrollment cliff. Like, I'm sure it's because you've heard it a lot, but what are your thoughts on, at 2025 enrollment cliff? It's still a topic that comes up in every podcast call that I have, pretty much, whether it's offline or during the actual conversation. But like, where do you think the shift is going right now?
I think right now, in terms of, I even hate the terms enrollment cliff. I think we're seeing a couple different things. We're seeing the shift in the decrease in the number of high school graduates, right? But we're also seeing a demographic shift where fewer and fewer of high school graduates are white. And it's like, well, that shouldn't be a problem, right? Because we should be able to recruit non-white students as well as we recruit white students. However, we know that there's so many systemic barriers in the way for non-white students that it's like we should have 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago figured that out. But the reality is we haven't. And so that's a challenge. Looking at also the kind of declining perception of the value of higher education, I am deeply concerned for particularly rural institutions that are not places like Virginia Tech, like the rural institutions that are maybe like, a second tier school in a state, a comprehensive, because the students in rural areas, white students in rural areas are making the decision more and more often to not enroll in college. Well, what are the bulk of the population of those rural schools? It is students from rural areas. And so I think rural schools, that's a funny word to say, rural schools,
Rural schools,
are
yeah.
right, are really going to have some struggles along with those smaller private schools. And I think the scrutiny on the value of higher education is going to be very, very difficult for private schools to overcome because the sticker shock, honestly, if you can look at, say, one institution in your state that is a public university, maybe it's not the flagship, but it's like, a second tier in your state, or where you can pay, maybe it's 15,000 a year, or you're looking at a private school in or out of state, and it's 30 to 60,000 a year. A price conscious family is going to choose that state university hands down. And so I think we need to be thinking as marketers about how to overcome price consciousness and be talking about value and what the value of higher education is, but also what the value is of it at the private institutions. And so if you're a higher ed marketer at a private school and you're not thinking about how to communicate to price conscious people, I think you're going to be in a real world of hurt pretty soon here.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, these are all amazing points, and it's something that comes up continuously. Like, I know it's like the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. And I'm glad that you're now on the non-institutional side, right? You're doing consulting. And so I think it's a little bit easier to talk about. But yeah, often it's like, I feel like there's an elephant in the room, and, the messaging has to address it sometimes. because it is, I mean, we've done surveys internally at Concept 3D, and financial reasons or financial aid is usually like number 1 or 2 position on admissions or application related questions. And so it's completely true, and it's there. So I completely agree. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I worked at an institution where the president did not want tuition and fees to be in the drop-down menu. They wanted it to be hard to find. And I was trying to explain to that president, like this is a big investment, right? Like you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, potentially 15 to 30 years of debt. And we're not being upfront about our pricing. And this was not at a private institution. This was at a actually really affordable public university. And so I think like with that mentality, we're not speaking to the Gen Alphas that are coming up who have very price conscious parents.
That's great. And yeah, this actually reminds me, I was speaking with Seth Odell, which I know you co-host a little bit with as well. And we were talking about how students are now sending applications after figuring out, what the sticker price is, versus like before. It was kind of like, in my generation at least, we applied to a lot of schools, and then the sticker price was kind of more of an afterthought. Now it's coming before the application process, and then people are being a little more selective, and that's changing the whole dynamic of the actual in-person campus visit as well. It's now being done later in the student life cycle versus earlier on, which is something Seth and I talked about as well. And so I feel like, yeah, the large sticker price plus, the change in digital has shifted like the whole student journey during the application process. So it's super interesting to look at.
For sure.
Well, great. I actually had some questions, with your experience in leadership marketing roles and CMO roles. How do you deal with the pressures that come from executive or leadership above you? Like, I know, you're having to wear multiple hats, right? Some roles are responsible for that CCO responsibility, like you mentioned earlier. Like, do you have any advice or tips around how to deal with the pressures, or even how to communicate things, like, so that you're not always just, trying to face all these burdens?
Dealing with the pressures from above is such a case-by-case basis based on the personality of your leadership. So there's some leaders that are very, I want to hear from you when you have concerns. I want to help you solve problems. And then there's other presidents who are like, I hired you to solve all the problems. Go solve the problems. But I think one thing that I strongly recommend that people do is think about their personal brand, and not just their brand out in the world and on LinkedIn, but their brand within their institution. When you have pressures coming from above, when people are talking about you in rooms that you're not in, you want them to say good things about you. And you want them to say, yeah, we have these pressures, but I think Jamie's got it. I think Jamie's got a good path forward. And so thinking about how you can build relationships across your campus with other leaders who are going to be in the same room with your leadership, and others across your institution who have influence and say, I think is really, really smart, because you need those people to be advocates for you, advocates for your department, advocates for the work that you're doing in those meetings with that leadership that might be trying to blame you for all the things. And then no matter what it takes, honestly, a lot of the pressures are coming from enrollment right now. If you do not have a good relationship with your enrollment leader, get a good relationship with them. Eat whatever crow you have to eat. Apologize for things you didn't do. Whatever take people out to coffee, drinks, beer, whatever. But build that relationship and build that trust with your enrollment leader, because you need to work hand in glove. You don't want the situation where when there's a class that comes in that's better than expected, it's all because of admissions. And when there's a class that comes in that's worse than expected, it's all because of marketing. You want there to be a we're in this together attitude. And sometimes that means you have to be the bigger person and apologize for things if you had, some difficulty in a relationship, or to reach out the olive branch if you've had difficulty and try to bridge that gap. And I know it's really hard, And I've been really lucky to work with great leaders where I haven't had to do that much. But I don't want to out anybody, but I have had to do that on some level. And it makes such a difference once you feel like you're all in it together and you have each other's backs.
It's amazing. I feel like I got the soundbite for a confession just there. that was
You did.
that was fantastic. Wow, that's great. Okay. Well, yeah, you heard it there. Make better friends with your enrollment teams. That's
For sure.
fantastic.
For sure. I'm giving a keynote in November on that topic because I just think that it's so important.
That's great. Well, shifting gears, I mean, we've gone over a lot of, the challenges that CMOs face, CCOs face. Can we talk a little bit more about this new path in your life, which is starting Solve Higher Ed Marketing?
Yeah. So last fall, I started thinking about how I could have a bigger impact on higher education. And I want to give a little bit of credit to the Academy for Innovative Higher Ed Leadership because it really got me thinking about where I could make the most change in higher education. And so since about November of 2023, I've been kind of quietly hatching this plan to launch my own consultancy where I can help a lot of universities move forward versus just the one institution for which I work, moving that institution forward. And so I launched the company officially on May 6th of 2024. And that was one of the scariest days ever. I had resigned my position in February, and the president had asked me to stay till the end of the fiscal year so that he could hire somebody and not have a gap since I wasn't taking a different job. I was able to do that. But when I made the big announcement, it was like, there's no going back right now. This is what I'm doing. And so I launched it on May 6th, and it has gone so well. I've been so pleased with the reaction and with the folks that have hired me. And I'm working with, I think I have 5 or 6 campus clients at this point, which is more than I expected to have already. And I don't know if you want to get into kind of what the work is that I'm doing or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first off, congratulations. That's
Thank
an
you.
amazing milestone. How are you feeling on May 5th and 6th? Like, I know you said it was the biggest thing you've ever done, but yeah, just crazy amount of emotions, like up and down, up and down.
I didn't sleep the night before. I took the day off when I made the announcement. I didn't sleep the night before. And I was like, what if I put this out there and no one reacts? I hear from no one. I get no reaction to it. And my husband was like, good grief, what are you talking about, girl? Like, that's not going to happen. And so I was just completely anxious. But then when I immediately started getting positive feedback and reaction, I haven't stopped smiling since that day because it's been such a validation that I made the right choice and that I'm doing what needs to be done.
That's awesome. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about the work you're doing as well. You said you already have a couple campus clients, which is amazing.
Yeah. So part of my business is doing things like keynotes, public speaking, and training. So I have some of those. But in terms of working with campus partners, I'm doing organizational assessments. So looking at an org structure for an institution and evaluating what might make the most sense. Or I also have a client where I'm working with them, they're centralizing. And what does centralization look like for their campus? Because there's no one size fits all solution for that. So that's some of what I'm doing. I'm also doing a lot around crisis communications. I think preparation is super important. So I'm doing audits of crisis communications plans and then crisis communication boot camps. I find a lot of the VPs in higher ed right now have come from marketing and they don't have a crisis communications background. And one of my clients was like, I was just sweating. Like my first crisis, I was like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. And my goal is to help them feel more prepared and ready to tackle whatever comes at them this fall. So I've been doing a number of those. And then I'm also doing things like branding projects where maybe there's a institutional brand, but a college or a division of the university needs a sub brand within that their main campus can't get to. And so I'm working with their CMO on developing a sub-brand for their that unit or college. And then a big piece of my work and something I'm really passionate about is doing student journey mapping. So mapping what the student journey is in the case of one of the clients I'm working with right now, from the time they're admitted through the end of their first year, to help impact yield, anti-melt, persistence, and retention. And I'm really passionate about persistence and retention, getting students from fall to spring and then from spring to their second year, because we lose so many students after that first year. And so how can we be communicating better, particularly to first generation and underrepresented students, to help them navigate that process to get from the time they're admitted through that whole first year. So I have some projects with that. But I'm also looking into doing some fractional CMO work and things like that too. But the projects I have right now, I'm really excited about and happy to be working on with the campus partners I have.
That's fantastic. And do you have a team? Or are you just solopreneuring it at the moment?
I am solopreneuring at the moment. I feel like after the last 9 years, it's nice to not be responsible for HR issues right now. But I am definitely looking for people to partner with for some of the bigger projects, like if I need to bring in a writer, if I need to bring in a designer, that kind of thing. And I'm not ruling out growing this into a larger agency. I'm kind of trying to float and feel and see how it goes. And I'm not much of a this is where I want to be in 5 years kind of person, because I feel like life is what happens when you make other plans. So I'm kind of feeling my way through what makes the most sense.
That's fantastic. No, I can get down with that. I'm historically very bad at planning. Like the 1 year is very great, and then 5 years okay, and then it's like the 10 I have no idea. So I totally
No.
feel that. And so you made the announcement on May 6th. Like what were like I saw the post blow up on LinkedIn, so I saw that in person a little bit. But what happened next? Did a few campuses immediately reach out and things just started to snowball or domino effect right after that?
Yeah, so a couple of the clients I have now had reached out to me before May 6th and said, can I make a recommendation for a vendor that does X, Y, or Z? And I was like, actually, I'm going to be doing X, Y, or Z when I start my new company. And so those were some of them. But I got a lot of DMs on LinkedIn and a lot of emails from people looking for proposals from me to tackle specific challenges that they were facing. And I was amazed that of the 10 requests that I got for proposals, 9 of those proposals were accepted. Like that just absolutely blew my mind, and also meant that I was not taking the month of July off as I planned. But I am not complaining, because it's good to start out strong.
This has been amazing, and love hearing about journeys of entrepreneurship. It's always fascinating. I love NPR's like How I Built This podcast. It's like one of my favorite podcasts to listen to in my pastime. So thanks so much for sharing that, and I'm really excited to follow that journey. I did have one last bit that I forgot to ask on the front end, which is I think I saw a post go viral about you posting a salary for a position in higher ed once, and it went bonkers. Like I think there was a couple thousand comments, and like I even looked at the comments and I saw people outside of higher ed even commenting. And yeah, I'm wondering, do you think someone in a CMO role or marketing leadership role has the power or ability to ask execs to pull in more money for this like very important role that the marketing function actually serves? Like, and how do you actually go about doing that? Because I know it gets talked about, but I don't work in the institutional side, and so I don't know if there's actually enough to give more.
Yeah, I think you need to be friends with your CFO and your HR people. So I've been really, really fortunate at my last institutions, both the last 2 institutions, to be able to say and make a case for additional pay for team members, because I had team members on my team who had been at the institution for decades, who are still making in the 40,000s. And to me, that's just not acceptable. And so being able to work with finance and with HR to say, these folks need to be paid more, because you can't just pay the new people better, right? You can't be like, okay, well, all my directors make 75,000, but all the directors I hire coming in, I'm going to pay at least 100. Like, that's not cool, right? So you really have to look at sort of both. How can you elevate the pay of new positions? And then how can you elevate the pay of people who are at your institution? And sometimes you might have to make tough choices and give up a position in order to use that funding to spread out across other people in your department. And that's just, sometimes there's sacrifices like that have to be made. And that's why you get paid better, and that's why you're the CMO or the VP, and you have to make those tough calls.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. I think we're just at about time. Where can our listeners follow you if you have any recommendations to reach out?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn all the time. Jamie Hunt, Jaime. I'm on X periodically at Jamie Hunt IMC, JAIME HUNT IMC. And then, of course, I have my website, which is solvehighered.com. And you can email me at jamie@solvehighered.com. And no matter how you spell Jamie, it comes to that address.
Well, thank you so much again. And thanks so much for our listeners for tuning in.
Thank you so much for having me.